What is horror? Is it jump scares that catch you off guard? Is it small, dark hallways with harsh noises coming from the other end? Is it a monster chasing you, seemingly getting closer every time you turn around? Horror is completely different for everyone. What one person may consider horror, another person may consider cheesy or cheap. But there is one game that I can confidently say grips every player that comes across it. One game that takes the rules of what a good horror game should be and flips it on its head. And that game is Mouthwashing. Before we begin today, I'd like to add a few side notes. Sorry for not uploading for a very long time. Life has gotten pretty busy. Also, this game contains very disturbing content, so if you're sensitive to any of these things that are on screen, I would highly recommend clicking away from this video now. And of course, huge spoiler warnings for everything mouthwashing related. So, without further ado, let's explore what makes mouthwashing so effective. Before we get into how mouthwashing uses its elements to craft such a compelling story, let's first dive into what this game is about. Mouthwashing is a first-person psychological horror that is about the dying crew of a crashed freighter in space. You play mainly as the ship's co-pilot Jimmy, while switching between events and time to piece together what really happened to the ship. There are a total of 5 crew members, consisting of Jimmy, who is already mentioned, Swansea, the mechanic, Daisuke, a last-minute intern for Swansea, Anya, the nurse, and lastly Curly, the captain of the ship, who was left brutally mutilated due to the crash that everyone believes he caused. While the story progresses, you learn that not everything is as it seems. Unraveling the mystery of what happened to the freighter leaves more questions than answers, and reveals that you cannot blindly trust everybody around you, including the character you play as. The game's mechanic of allowing you to see the build-up to major events allows for the player to realize the true intentions behind some of the members of the crew. The game does an incredible job at making the characters feel unique and human, especially Jimmy, as you see the game through his perspective, essentially playing through his memories of the event, not only just as he saw them, but how he felt and perceived them in his own way. Along with its changing perspective, Mouthwashing uses a collective of other elements to build up its narrative, including a large part of what makes a good story is good characters. A flaw I see too much of in not only the horror genre but all genres is a great concept and storyline held back by its lack of well-written characters. This, fortunately, is not the case for Mouthwashing. Each character has their own identity, which makes all of them distinct from each other, allowing for their personalities to clash as they manage their situation to the best of their abilities. There is so much to talk about and inspect in each of the crew members, so why don't we just go down the list and dive into what makes each character special? As previously stated, Anya is the nurse of the freighter. She is gentle and soft-spoken and was placed in charge of the psych evaluations that all the members of the ship have to take. Anya's purpose throughout the story is to show the true malice of humanity from the perspective of the victim instead of the attacker. Her friendly demeanor and care for others results in her being taken advantage of, which is the disturbing reality for many people in the real world. She's also a character that you can sympathize with and end up rooting for throughout the story, hoping that her happy ending that she deserves becomes a reality for her. A reality that will soon fall flat as we continue through the game. When first introduced to the mechanic of the ship, Swansea, many people will assume that he is the stereotypical grump. He's foul-mouthed, pot-bellied, and gruff. His character arc as a whole symbolizes the cycle of fleeting hope in society. Nearing the end of the game, we learn that Swansea used to have no prospects for the future, no real goals in life, and most importantly, no hope in himself or the people around him. He would have much rather spent his life drunk and throwing up all night than live a normal life. He starts to build his life back up from the deep, dark hole he was stuck in and creates a family and a name for himself. However, his perspective on life changed after he reflected on his past and how his future would look if he continued down his current path. But he felt even worse than he had before his epiphany. He's a very realistic and grounded character, showcasing the need and desire for more that most, if not all, humans have. While the previous characters are parallel to the harsh realities of society and life as a whole, Daisuke is completely oblivious to these things, as he symbolizes the innocence of youth and inexperience. The creators of the game portray this as allowing Daisuke to get attached to the 4 other members of the crew, especially Swansea, as he was the one who took Daisuke under his wing. His character and personality is, in effect, the exact opposite of Swansea's. While Swansea has lost hope and faith in humanity, Daisuke still believes that there's good in everyone and is happy to make everyone smile. However, while his identity is mainly positive, it adds an extra layer of anguish when he is exposed to the cruelty of humanity. When the creators made Curly's character, they ran into a very unique problem. Curly rarely talks. They had to figure out a way to make Curly's character shine through just like the rest of them with very few moments of dialogue to work with. In these moments of dialogue, it is obvious to the audience that Curly's main flaw is not being able to hold people accountable for their actions, and only seeing the good in others, even when their bad actions outweigh their positive attributes. This is especially shown when he becomes unable to care for himself, and he finally sees the evil hidden within his closest companions. Now, there's something different about Jimmy, something that completely separates him from the other characters. Anya symbolizes the evil of humanity through the eyes of a victim. Swansea symbolizes the loss of hope for humanity. Daisuke symbolizes the innocence of humanity, and Curly symbolizes the ignorance of humanity in the face of their wrongdoings. Jimmy, however, is not like the others. He is not viewing these things from an outside perspective. He is not an after effect or a participant in these actions. He is the evil itself. He is humanity's wrongdoings. He is the pure hatred and wrath of human nature, and yet he doesn't view himself as this for the better part of the game, which, in a sense, makes him even more malicious. His complete lack of self-awareness makes him the true monster of this game. Mouthwashing uses a plethora of gameplay and narrative devices in order to make it more engaging and interesting. This section is going to be a short summary of the main devices used throughout the game, so I'll only touch briefly on each. But this doesn't mean that the game isn't chock full of different mechanics it uses to tell its grim tale. There are so many moments of subtle and also not so subtle foreshadowing throughout the game. For instance, the way Curly slices into the birthday cake at his mock birthday party the crew throws for him is eerily similar to the way Jimmy cuts his leg off at the end of the game. And Swansea slamming an axe into the large television screen in a fit of drunken rage foreshadows his method of putting Daisuke out of his misery, as he later drives the same axe into his face. While the game likes to draw obvious connections between events, it also leaves some moments up for interpretation for the player. As an example, Curly describing how he spends nights tossing and turning or just staring at the ceiling foreshadows his fate after the crash, as he is left completely immobile and is forced to spend his time on the ship stuck on a medical bed. But sometimes the game doesn't just leave it up to the visual cues to execute its story. Sometimes what's left unseen leaves a bigger impact on us than what's shown to us in plain sight. Mouthwashing's use of sound takes its disturbing elements and turns them into straight-up horrifying moments that had me tearing up. It leaves very little to the imagination, sometimes opting to blacken out the screen during intense moments, such as this one. Yeah, that screwed me up. Another great example of sound design in this game would be Daisuke's death, as you can hear his breathing get increasingly quicker as he waits for Swansea to end his suffering. And you'll find that the lack of sound at certain points is actually more effective than if there were sound. I'll play that clip for you now. The developers carefully selected these moments in order to leave the situation up to the player's interpretation, causing the player to envision the worst-case scenario in their heads. But some things in this game are too important to only happen once. Some things are just too crucial to be mentioned and then thrown off to the side. Some ideas and motifs the developers were trying to showcase were simply too relevant to the plot that they needed a way to make sure the player understood them, and the developers knew just how to do this. Symbols are a major part of what makes Mouthwashing's story so cohesive, and the objects and the ideas that they represent are one of the most well-developed parts of the game. The biggest example of symbols in this game comes from the name of the game itself, the mouthwash. Now, if you practice basic dental hygiene, you are well aware that mouthwash is supposed to be purifying and cleansing. As the crew starts to succumb to starvation, they decide to do the one thing they aren't supposed to do: open the cargo hold in hopes of food. What they find, however, is that for the past 2 months, they've been sitting on hundreds of thousands of boxes of just mouthwash. And only mouthwash. And a key detail of the bottles in the game are that they state that they kill 99.9% of germs, like any bottle of mouthwash you'll find in the real world. The act of cleansing and purifying whatever it touches is in direct relation to how the characters in this game behave and view themselves. There are flaws within each crew member of the Tulpar, and that is a 0.1% that they could never rid themselves of. As the crew starts to lose all hope and become more and more deranged, these flaws shine through their fake exterior. They shine as bright as the fake LED screen in the living room, which, along with the characters, has a flaw: a single dead pixel in the corner of the screen. This detail is mentioned in a past conversation with Anya and Curly, in which Curly explains that one dead pixel doesn't matter, and that when you look at the big picture, it appears that nothing is wrong at all. He is of course proven wrong later in the story, when Swansea breaks the screen, effectively ruining the big picture, and creating a visual representation of the crew's breaking point, when their small dead pixels turned into a broken mess. It also perfectly encapsulates Curly's character, showing that he will do everything to avoid the situation, becoming deflective and turning a blind eye to people's flaws in the hopes that they won't become problems in the future. As previously stated, this game does an amazing job at creating unique and complex characters that make you either detest or fall in love with them. One of the key ways that they are able to pull this off is through Another thing that Mouthwashing does really well here is having an unreliable narrator. Jimmy is not to be trusted, as you quickly learn throughout the game that he is the cause of more and more problems happening on the ship, culminating into the player discovering that he was the sole reason for the Tulpar's crash. The way that Jimmy sees the characters influences the way the players see them as well. While Anya's character is written as a strong, lively, and loving woman, seeing her interactions with Jimmy makes the player assume that she is meek, timid, and submissive. Jimmy's complete lack of self-awareness, as mentioned before, even makes the player think differently of Jimmy himself, as at the end of the game, after placing Curly in the cryo chamber, he believes that he is the true hero of the story. Even after committing the pain and torment that he has inflicted on every single member of the crew on the ship, he believes that he is completely in the right, that he has taken responsibility and fixed everything. Of course, this moment is when the mirage is broken and the player has seen enough to realize that he is in fact the true villain of the story. Going into a game like this, you immediately expect it to be about an unknown creature or alien being let into the ship due to the crash, when in reality, the monsters all along are the people. It's the perfect setting for a classic alien horror slasher game, but after playing it, you realize it is anything but. By using the collection of elements that have been mentioned in this video and others that weren't mentioned, it creates a perfect submersive story that stands apart from others in the genre. Throughout the history of horror games, many cliches have been formed. The killer is always right behind you. Every corner turned is another chance to be spotted by a deadly creature waiting to attack. But there are no deadly creatures in this game. There are no killers behind the corner. There are no scary monsters to run from, no loud noises to knock you out of your chair. The fear and the horror that come from this game creeps up slowly. It completely subverts expectations and fills the player with a sense of dread, because after finishing the game, the player realizes the true horror. The true monster, the true killer, is humanity, and the darkness that lurks within the murky depths. like the ship stuck forever, drifting through the darkness of space. I want to quickly thank everyone who helped me make this video, and also thank you for watching it. I am so happy I can share my thoughts on this game because I love it so much, and I really want to hear from you guys. Did you love this game like I did, or did it not really please you? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful night or day wherever you are, and I will see you guys in the next one.